Hello crochet lovers, welcome once again to our channel. Today I want you to discover with me the entrelac technique, which is a Tunisian stitch variation. If you want to know more about the Tunisian stitch, you can check the videos out in the pull down eye. With this entrelac technique, the stitches are very tight and compact, so it's ideal for pillows, blankets, scarves, or everything else you can imagine. Remember that for the Tunisian stitch, we need a longer hook, so that all the stitches fit properly. So I don't recommend you use an ergonomic hook for this project. We make one slip stitch, and we begin by making as many chains as we want for our little base square. Remember that each square needs to fit in our hook. I'll make 10 chains, and we'll call this number X. You can make as many as you want for the width of your base square for the entrelac. And now we'll start going back from the second chain. And we'll yarn over in each chain available. Just yarn over chain by chain. And keep all those loops on the hook. That's why this square can't be too big, because we would not be able to fit it in a normal hook. I am now at the final chain. We should have the same number X of loops, which for me is 10. We'll go back on this, we pull through the first loop, and after this we'll pull through 2 at a time. 2, 2, another 2, and so on until we get to the other side. This is how a row of Tunisian stitch looks. We should see these vertical lines, which is where we'll make the next row. We'll consider this stitch worked on. So we go to the next vertical line and we yarn over from there. We yarn over again in the next vertical line, and we keep yarning over each of those vertical lines until we get to the end of the row. We'll yarn over 2 from the last vertical line, which sometimes can be a little hidden. Don't forget that one. And then we go back. We pull through just one loop at first, and then through 2 at a time, until we get to the other side. Right now we have 2 rows of Tunisian stitches, and we'll keep growing until we have the X number minus 2 rows. For me, it's 8, but you make as many as you need, your X number minus 2 rows. I'm making now row 3 with the same instructions. Remember that going back, we pull through 1 loop first, and then we keep going back 2 loops at a time. That's the 3rd row. I need to make X number minus 2, so I'll just keep repeating the instructions. I've finished doing X number minus 2 rows. We can count the vertical lines to verify. There are my 8 rows. And as you can see, the last row seems a bit open with those gaps. So we'll make slip stitches in each of those vertical lines. So we yarn over and we finish making the slip stitch. Then we go to the next vertical line. We yarn over and make a slip stitch. And we do this in each stitch until we get to the end. We should have the X number of slip stitches. For me, it's 10. And that would be our first square in the entrelac style. We have finished the first one. This is how it all starts. We make 1 chain to close the square, and then we cut the yarn. For my next row, in order to have 2 squares, one next to the other, we'll begin in this corner of the previous square. We make a slip knot with the new color, and we set it on the hook like this. And now we're ready to begin this new entrelac row. This will be an initial type of square. For these types of squares called initial, we'll start with X number minus 1 chains. So for me, it's 9 chains. You make your X number minus 1. And now we'll go back from the second chain by yarning over in each chain available. Remember to leave those loops on the hook. And when we get to the end, we should have X number minus 1 loops on the hook. And we'll yarn over one last time from that hole in which we brought in the new color. Now, if we count them again, we should have X number of loops. So we now go back 2 at a time. At the beginning, we pull through 2, then another 2, and so on until we get to the other side. For this initial type of squares, we'll always pull through 2 at a time. We have finished the first row, so now we'll begin row 2. We yarn over in each vertical line, and we keep adding loops on the hook by yarning over each vertical line. The last vertical line is here. Right now, we should have X number minus 1 loops on the hook, and the final loop will be made by yarning over the next hole of our previous square. We now have X number of loops, and we pull through 2 at a time until we get to the end. We have 2 rows now, and we'll keep growing like this until we have X number minus 2 rows. So we yarn over each vertical line. The last loop will be made by yarning over the next hole in the previous square. And we pull through 2 at a time. This was row 3. And we keep crocheting until we have X number minus 2 rows. We can always count the vertical lines to verify the rows. And at the end, we close it off with a slip stitch in each vertical line. This is how we close the square. We'll make the last slip stitch in the hole that's right at the corner. And this loop will work as a first loop for our final type of square. For this type of square, we'll yarn over each of the top loops available in the previous square. Sometimes it's a bit hard because remember, it's slip stitches. The last loop will be made by yarning over on the very corner. And like this, we should have X number of loops. For me, it's 10. And now to go back, we pull through 1 loop first. And after that, we pull through 2 at a time. We're going back the same way we did for the very first square we made. I have finished the first row now. And we keep making rows until we have X number minus 2 rows, which for me is 8. We yarn over in each vertical line. Don't forget to work on the last one. That's why it's important to count the loops we have on the hook. I have X number of loops. And to go back, we do 1 first, and then 2 at a time. And we keep making rows until we have X number minus 2 rows, which is what we always make for all squares. We finish the square with a slip stitch like all the other ones. And we begin our third entrelac row. So we yarn over through here. We bring it in through the back, and we're ready to begin with an initial type of square, just like we did before. So we make X number minus 1 chains, then we yarn over from each available chain. We should have X number minus 1 chains. And the loop to complete the X number will be done when we yarn over the first hole available. Now we go back 2 at a time. You already know these instructions. They are for all the initial types of squares. I'm just repeating them once more. And we keep going until we have X number minus 2 rows, which is when we close with slip stitches. The last slip stitch works as the first loop for our new square, which is a sandwich type of square. Whenever we have 2 sides to build our square, we'll be making these types of squares. So we begin by yarning over each top loop available from the previous square. This can be a little tricky, so I suggest you make the closing slip stitches as loose as you can. Here we have x minus 1 loops from yarning over the square below, and from the other square we'll yarn over its first gap to have the final loop on the hook. Now we have x number of loops and we go back 2 at a time until we finish this Tunisian stitch row. There we go, the first row's ready, and we keep growing on this side. We yarn over each vertical line. We have x number minus 1 loops on the hook, and the final one will be made by yarning over the next gap of the square we have next to it. And we have 2 rows now. We just keep growing, you already know this, until we have x number minus 2 rows. We close the square with the slip stitches on the last row. Then we make the last slip stitch in the gap at the corner. And this loop will be the first for our next square, which is the final type of square. We'll always end the corners with the final type of square. We yarn over in each top loop available. This is only a review because we already know how to make the final type of squares. The last loop for the final type of squares comes from the very corner. Now I have x number of loops, remember to count them to verify. And we pull through 1 and then through 2 at a time. We finish that square with the slip stitches and 1 chain, so that the thread does not become loose. And we have already learned the basis of the entrelac technique. Now we just have to keep going. With each row, we'll have more and more sandwich type of squares. We'll always have one initial one, then we make as many sandwich squares as we need, and then one final type of square. We keep growing until we have the width of the square we want. I'm making a cushion, so I'll stop now. And now we'll make only sandwich type of squares to decrease the size. So whenever you don't want to add any more to the width, we'll skip the initial square and we'll make only the sandwich type of squares. So we insert a hook right here, we bring in the new yarn, we skip the initial square, and with the new yarn, we begin making a sandwich square. This is my first loop. And now, we work on this side by yarning over each top loop in order to begin our sandwich type of square. Remember that the final loop comes from yarning over the next square, and we go back 2 at a time. You already know these instructions. I'm just showing you how to begin reducing the size. We keep making sandwich type of squares, as many as you all need. I just made my last one, and we'll also skip the final type of square. We close this one with slip stitches. This was the last sandwich type of square from this row. We make the last slip stitch at the very corner. We chain 1 to close it off, and we skip the final type of square. As you can see, this way helps us close the square. We just need to make the sandwich type of squares. If we wish to make a rectangle, we will skip the initial type of squares, but we would keep making the final type. That way, this would grow on one side, and whenever we wanted to stop growing, we would just make the sandwich type of squares. This is my last sandwich square. It's the end of my cushion. We close it off with slip stitches. You already know this. We make the last chain to finish it off, and we cut the thread. We have finished making a square with the entrelac technique. For my cushion, I made 2 identical squares, and I attached them together with single crochet stitches. And that's it, crochet lovers. I hope you liked this tutorial. Don't forget to check my other videos to find more stitches and techniques in other crochet tutorials so you can keep exploring your creativity to the fullest. I'll see you very soon. Don't forget to click on the bell so you get all of our notifications. Have a great day, crochet lovers!